Hello there. Welcome back to Insta School. Insta School is an online learning platform where you can get educational content anywhere and anytime. I am Lillian and I'll be the biology tutor. I'd like you to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook and on Instagram at instaschool_edu. You can also refer your friends so together you enjoy educational content. Today we'll be treating WAEC past question for the year 2010 biology. Now let's move on to the first question. The question 1 says, which of the following organism is not classified as an animal? Now when we talk about animal, what are some of the characteristics of animals that distinguishes them, that distinguishes an organism as being an animal and not a plant? Well, if we follow the 5-kingdom classification, animals all belong under the kingdom Animalia. Animals are also multicellular organisms, that is, they have more than one cell to help to carry out their life functions. Animals are also heterotrophic. And when we say an organism is heterotrophic, it means that these organisms cannot produce their own food but rely on plants for food. Most animals also do not have the ability, most animals have the ability to move about freely. Now, if we take a look at our options, we have amoeba, paramecium, euglena, and orbelia. Orbelia is an organism that falls under the kingdom Animalia, phylum Cnidaria. Paramecium is also a unicellular organism. Euglena is also a unicellular organism that possesses both plant-like and animal-like features. But the odd one out of our option is amoeba. And why do we say so? We say this because amoeba is a unicellular organism, but they are classified under the kingdom Protista. So our answer is the option A, amoeba. Amoeba is not considered as an animal. Moving on to question 2. Our question 2 says, an organization that operates at the cellular level of organization carries out its physiological activities by using its dash. When we talk about an organization that operates at the cellular level of organization, we are referring to unicellular organisms, that is, organisms that have just one cell that helps them to carry out their activities such as excretion, reproduction, and other activities that help to sustain their lives. Now, examples of such organisms is the amoeba and the paramecium. These organisms carry out these functions and activities using their cell organelle. Now, this cell organelle performs the same function as the tissue and the organs in multicellular and higher organisms. So when we go back to our option B explains what carries out the physiological activities in unicellular organisms. Now we move on to question 3. The organelle which eliminates water from the body of a protozoan is the dash. Now, what do we mean when we talk about a protozoan? A protozoan refers to a unicellular organism that belongs under the phylum Protista. An example of a protozoa is a paramecium, volvox, and even plasmodium. The protozoan possess cell organelles that help in activities. Now, some of these organelles are the nucleus, the Golgi apparatus, and so on. but the organelle that is responsible for maintaining water balance in their body is the contractile vacuole. And how does it do this? It helps to maintain the water balance by removing excess water out of the cell. So when we go back to our option B is the most correct option. The contractile vacuole helps to eliminate excess water from the body of a protozoan. Moving on to question 4. Which of the following cell types has the least number of mitochondria? Now, what is the mitochondria? Mitochondria is a cell organelle found in the cytoplasm of the cell. The mitochondrion functions as the powerhouse of the cell. And why do we say it is the powerhouse of the cell? This is because energy production takes place within the mitochondria. Now, to answer our question, let us examine few of our options. Our option A says the cardiac cell of the heart. Now, in the cardiac cell, in the heart muscles, we have about 40% of mitochondria in the cytoplasm. Now, what of the cells of the conified layer? When we talk about the conified cells, we're talking about those cells that form the layers of the epidermal layer of the skin. The conified cells have thousands of mitochondria, and these mitochondria helps the skin to heal wounds faster, and it also helps in pigmentation. Now, what about our option C, the cell of the bladder? The cell of the bladder has only about 345 mitochondria. Now, if we review our option once again, we can see that the cells of the conified layer has the most number of mitochondria. Moving on to our question 5. A typical plant cell is mainly distinguished from an animal cell by the possession of what? Now, we know that plants and animals have cells. These cells help to control their metabolic activities. We have similarities between the plant cell and the animal cell. Some of the similarity includes the presence of nucleus, the presence of mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, and so on. But there are also differences between the plant cell and the animal cell. Now, one major difference between the plant cell and the animal cell is that the plant cell possesses a cell wall. This cell wall helps to give shape and support to the cell. On the other hand, the animal cell lacks a cell wall. Another major difference is that the plant cell possesses chloroplast. And why do you think they possess chloroplast? This chloroplast enables them to photosynthesize, that is, to carry out photosynthesis in order to be able to produce their own food. On the other hand, animal cells lack chloroplast since they are not photosynthetic. As I said earlier, animals are heterotrophic, that is, they cannot produce their own food, unlike plants. Another major difference between plant cell and animal cell is that plant cell has a large vacuole that is located at the center of the cell. This large vacuole serves for storage purpose, while the animal cell has smaller vacuoles that are scattered around the cell. So let's go back to our option. We can distinguish a plant cell from an animal cell due to the possession of chloroplast and cell wall. And you remember from my explanation that I said a plant cell possesses a chloroplast and a cell wall, while an animal cell lacks these organelles. So our answer is option C. Moving on to question 6. Which of the following characteristics do fungi share in common with animals? Now, what are fungi to begin with? Fungi are multicellular organisms that are similar to plants in one way and are also similar to animals. Now, one of the ways in which they are similar to plants is that they are eukaryotes. They are eukaryotic organisms. And what does it mean for our organism to be eukaryotic? It means that the organism have their cell organelles enclosed in the cell wall. And if you can remember, I said plant cell also has a cell wall that supports the plant and also keeps the cell organelles in place. Fungi can also not move from one place to another. That is another characteristic they share with plants. Now, what about animals? Some of the features that they share with animals is that they are heterotroph. And what this means is that they cannot make or produce their own food, but they have to rely on plants for food. When they get these nutrients in form of carbohydrates, they store it as glycogen in their body the same way animals do. On the other hand, plants can store their own food in form of starch. Now, when we look at our option, the one that best fits our answer is the option C. Fungi store carbohydrates as glycogen, just like animals do. Now, without wasting much time, we'll move on to question 7. Which of the following processes involves diffusion? Diffusion is a process that helps in gaseous movement in the body, and diffusion does not require energy. Now, when we take a look at our option A says the opening and closing of stomata pores, that is, on a leaf. The opening and closing of the stomata pores on a leaf is an osmotic process, not a diffusion process. Now, when we talk about turgidity of the plant, turgidity of the plant helps the plant to stand upright, and this is a plasmolytic process. Now, what about option C? Absorption of water through root hairs. That's in plants. Option C can either be an active or a passive absorption process. Now, the only option that goes with our question is option D. And why do we say so? Because absorption of digested food into the villi is possible only through the process of diffusion. Because the small intestine, the villi is a part of the small intestine, and it is especially specialized for absorption. It also absorbs nutrients through the process of diffusion. Now, let us move on to the next question. Question 8 says, the mechanism of opening and closing of the stomata in plants is based on dash. Now, the opening and closing of stomata are regulated by the guard cells through sugar pressure. Usually, the stomata are open during the day in order for gaseous exchange to occur and in order for transpiration to occur. Transpiration is simply the release of water vapor into the atmosphere. Now, during the time when the stomata is opened, the guard cells can swell and become turgid. But at night, the stomata is usually closed, and this is done in order to limit transpiration rates and in order to save water in the plant's body. And when this occurs, the guard cells become flaccid because they shrink. Now, from my explanation, we can derive that the opening of the stomata is based on turgidity, while the closing of the stomata is based on flaccidity. So our answer is our option B. Moving on to question 9. In cellular respiration, energy is available to organism by dash. Cellular respiration is a process that occurs within the mitochondria of the cell, and it simply converts energy that is gotten from glucose molecules to the energy that is required for the cell to function. Now, this energy is usually in form of ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate. ATP is required by the cell to function. And how is this ATP gotten? It is gotten from the synthesis of ADP, adenosine diphosphate. Now, adenosine diphosphate synthesizes with phosphate. But how is this energy released? It is released when a phosphate group is broken away from the adenosine triphosphate molecule. This released energy can be lost as heat from the body into the environment. Now, when we go back to our options, we can see that our option B best explains how energy is available to organism by breaking off a phosphate group to glucose. Our question 10 says, excretion in paramecium is by diffusion because how or why is excretion in paramecium said to be done by diffusion? Well, paramecium excretes undigested food matters and excess water through their contractile vacuole. This helps to maintain their water balance. They do this by diffusion. And why do we say so? This is because they have a large surface area to volume ratio, and this is due to their small cell size. So when we say excretion in paramecium is by diffusion, it is because paramecium has a large surface area to volume ratio. Moving on to question 11. The axial skeleton is composed of the dash. The axial skeleton of vertebrates is composed of the bone of the head, that is the skull and the bone of the face. It is also composed of the vertebrae. When we talk about the vertebrae, we are talking about bones that protect the spinal cord. So when we go back to our options, our option A is the best answer because the axial skeleton is composed of the skull and the vertebral column. Question 12. The inorganic components of bones consist of dash. Now, our bone is very important for movement. It is also a major component of the skeleton. Now, what is the bone made up of? It is made up of 60% inorganic components, 30% organic components, and 10% water. The organic component of our bone is the osteoid, and this osteoid contains collagen fibers, glycoproteins, while the organic component, provides the bone with flexibility, while the inorganic component gives the bone hardness. Now, these inorganic components are mineral salts such as calcium carbonate, magnesium hydroxide, and phosphorus. Now, let's go back to our options. The inorganic components of bones consist of magnesium, phosphorus, and calcium carbonate. That's our option B. That's the best answer to explain the inorganic components of bones. Now, our question 13. A pulse A pulse is best described as dash. When we say pulse, we are describing our heart rate, that is, the number of times our heart beats within a short time. Usually, we can measure our pulse by the number of times our heart beats in a minute, and it is done using a stethoscope. But in science, we can best describe a pulse as the action of the heart to move blood around the whole body. Now let's go back to our option. We can see our option D, the pumping action of the heart, because the heart pumps blood to move around the body. So that's our option D. Question 14. The following characteristics are associated with the mammalian lungs except dash. Now, as mammals, we have two lungs. These lungs have a spongy-like texture, and this is due to the presence of tiny air sacs known as alveoli in the lung. The lung usually receives deoxygenated blood from the heart. It, on its own part, releases oxygenated blood. Now, from our option, the odd one out of this option is our option B, expandable lungs. And why do we say so? This is because the lung is not some stretchy or flexible organ. It can only expand for a while we breathe in and breathe out, but it is not stretchy. So that is why we say our lung is not expandable. So that is why our option B is the most suitable answer. Question 15. The excretory system in mammals consists of the following parts except dash. Now, when we talk about the excretory system is made up of different organs that helps in the removal of waste products from the body. It consists of our kidney, our ureter, the bladder, and the urethra. We have two kidneys, two ureter, which connects the bladder to the kidney. We have one bladder and one urethra. Now, what is the urethra? The urethra is the hole through which we pee, and this is also through which menstrual blood leaves the body of women. So the odd one out of our option is option C, because we do not have two bladders, we have just one bladder. The organ that receives reduced flow of blood during rigorous exercise is the dash. Now, during rigorous exercise, blood flow is increased to the skeletal muscles, while the heart functions in pumping out more blood. But blood flow to the brain is decreased, and this is due to hyperventilation and also pressure. Now, going back to our question, the organ that receives reduced flow of blood is the brain during rigorous exercise. That's our option A. Our question 17 says, the ear pinna is strengthened by dash. The pinna of the ear is the visible part of our ear, that is the outer ear. And instead of bones, this pinna is strengthened by cartilage. The cartilage is a type of tissue that provides flexibility for some of our body parts, such as our ear, our nose, and so on. So our answer is option B, the cartilage. Cartilage strengthens the ear pinna. Question 18. The relationship between the retina and the brain is similar to that between the dash and the dash. Now, when we talk about the retina, It is connected to the brain by optic nerve. The retina transmits light signals to the brain through these optic nerve. So when we look at our option, the relationship of the retina and the brain is similar to that of the cochlea and the auditory nerve. And why do we say so? Because the cochlea is the spiral-shaped part of the inner ear that helps to transform sound waves into impulses through the auditory nerve. That is why we say this relationship is similar to that of the cochlea and the auditory nerve. Option A. Question 19. Which of the following statements about the development of the fetus is not correct? Now, what is a fetus? A fetus is simply an unborn baby. The fetus is an unborn baby that is growing inside its mother's womb. The development of a fetus is dependent on the food that it receives from its mother. It also receives oxygen from its mother, and it does so through the placenta. Now, inside the womb, the fetus is surrounded by a water sac known as the amniotic sac. This amniotic sac helps to protect the fetus while it is still inside the womb. Now, which is the odd one out of our option? It is our option A. And why do we say so? Because the option A is very wrong. Because the placenta does the job of the lungs for the fetus by supplying it with oxygen that it needs to survive. Our option A says the circulatory system of the fetus is directly connected to the maternal blood vessels, but this is wrong because the placenta plays the role of the lungs by supplying oxygen to the fetus even while inside its mother's womb. Our question 20, we have a diagram, and it says we should use the diagram to answer question 20 and question 21. Our question 20 says the parts that supplies food and water to the developing embryo are labeled dash. Now, when we look at this diagram, we can see an egg. The part labeled 1 here is known as the air space, while the part labeled 2 here is known as the blastoderm. The part labeled 3 is the chalaza, part labeled 4 is the eggshell, part labeled 5 is the albumin, while the part labeled 6 is the yolk. But the fetus or the developing embryo can get water and nutrients from its mother through the yolk and the albumin. That is our part labeled 5 and 6. That's our option C. Our question 21 says the part labeled 3 is the dash. As I've said just now, the part labeled 3 is the chalaza. And the function of the chalaza is to hold the yolk in place, that is, to help it to maintain a balanced position. So our answer is option B, chalaza. Question 22. Which of the following statements is true about transpiration? Now, first, what is transpiration? Transpiration is a very important part of the water cycle. And this is because water is lost from plants into the atmosphere through water vapor. This water vapor is usually lost specifically through the stomata that are found on the surface of plant leaves. So let's go back to our option. Our option A describes perfectly what transpiration is. That is the loss of water in form of water vapor from the surface of the leaf. Question 23. Transportation of water in the xylem tissue involves the following except dash. Now, the xylem tissue of plants is responsible for transporting water and also dissolved nutrients from the roots of plants to their leaves. Now, this xylem tissue follows the principle of capillary action, that is, an upward rise from the roots. We can also say it follows transpirational pull, that is, something is being pulled from down to the up. And also root pressure, because the water and the dissolved minerals are coming from the roots. Now, the only principle that the xylem tissue does not follow from our option is translocation. And why do we say so? Because translocation involves the movement of materials from the leaves to the other parts of the plant. This is usually done by the phloem tissue. The phloem tissue helps to conduct food from the leaves, that is where the food are produced, to the stem and to the other parts of the plant. So our answer is option D. The xylem tissue does not involve the translocation process. Question 24. The following are the major reasons why the butterfly lay eggs under the surface of a leaf except to dash. Now, the butterflies and the moths like to lay their egg on the underside of the leaf. And they do this in order to avoid the direct effect on sunlight on their eggs, because the effects of sunlight can help to dry up their egg. They also do this to keep their eggs safe from predators or enemies. But one of the reasons why butterflies do not lay their egg from our option is to camouflage the egg. And why do we say so? Because these eggs are not like chameleons. They do not have the ability to change their color or to blend with their environment. So that is the odd one out. That is our option D. Now our question 25 says, in which of the following organic compound is hydrogen to oxygen ratio equal to 2:1? Now when we look at our option, the carbohydrate has a ratio of 1:2:1. That is, carbon is 1 atom, hydrogen is 2 atoms, and oxygen is 1 atom. Now what about lipids? Lipids has 1 atom of carbon, 2 atoms of hydrogen, but less than 1 atom of oxygen. So if we look at our option, carbohydrates best suits our answer because hydrogen to oxygen ratio is 2:1, while carbon is 1. A man suffering from obesity must avoid meals containing dash. Our question 26. Now, what is obesity? Obesity is simply the presence of accumulated body fat, too much of body fat in the body. Obesity can increase the rate of diabetes or even heart diseases. So an obese person like this man in question should avoid consuming food that are rich in fat. Now from our option, which of these food do you think are rich in fat? That should be our option A, right? Margarine and butter. Because butter and margarine are majorly fat. So an obese person will want to run away from such meals. Now question 27. In testing for starch in a leaf, the leaf is first boiled in water for about a minute so that dash. Now, what is the reason behind boiling leaf in water in our test for starch? Well, in order for us to test for starch in a leaf, we have to boil the leaf in water for about 30 seconds. Doing so helps to kill the cells completely because chemical reaction within the leaf cannot occur at high temperature, that is the temperature of the water in which you are boiling it in. Now, after boiling the leaf for 30 seconds, we add alcohol to the leaf. We can either add alcohol or put the leaf to a boiling alcohol. This will help to absorb the green color of the leaf and it will break down the chlorophyll. Lastly, the leaf is washed with water, spread on a white towel. Iodine solution is then dropped on the leaf. Now, the part of the leaf that turns blue-black shows the presence of starch. So that is simply our test for starch on leaf. So when we go to our option, why do we boil water? Why do we add leaf to boiling water for about a minute in our test for starch? We do so in order to kill the cells present in the leaf. Question 29. Question 29 says, which of the following food substance is incorrectly linked to its enzyme? Now when we talk about digestive enzymes, we're talking of those enzymes that help to break down complex food particles into smaller molecules and digestible molecules. Now, one of the digestive enzymes we have is amylase. Amylase helps to break down starch into simple sugar in order for it to be digested into the body. Lipase helps to break down fats or lipids into fatty acid. Protease also help to break down protein into smaller polypeptides. So the odd one out of here is option C, sucrose. And this is because sucrose is broken down by an enzyme known as sucrase. Moving on to question 29. Which of the following pH values is the best for the action of the enzymes renin and pepsin in the stomach? The enzyme renin and pepsin are proteins, that is, they are digestive enzymes that break down proteins into simpler molecules known as amino acids. These enzymes are located in the stomach. And for them to work at optimal level, the stomach should be at a pH of 2 to 3.5. Now we go back to our options. Our option A tells us exactly what pH the renin and pepsin works. That's pH 2. Question 30. The bacterium in the mutualistic association with legumes converts dash. Now, what is the name of that bacterium or bacteria that is in a mutualistic association with legume? It is known as the rhizobium. And the function of rhizobium is to fix nitrogen in the soil. And it does this by changing nitrogen gas into ammonia, because plants can only absorb nitrogen when it is in form of ammonia. So our answer is option C. The bacterium that is rhizobium, because that is the name of that bacteria that is in mutualistic association with legumes. It helps to convert nitrogen gas to ammonia.